Welcome back to the Peace Offering Kitchen. It is the season of the squash, and this tiny little pumpkin is growing everywhere abundantly. These are great because they'll keep all winter long. If you grow pumpkins, you can harvest them and store them in a cool, dark place and eat all winter long. And so stuffing these pumpkins is something I like to do. You can have total creative freedom with it. You can stuff it with just about anything. You can even make it dessert. But today we're going to make sort of a sausage and bread stuffing. I'm going to use this venison sausage and this gluten-free sourdough bread. And then just because this is what we have growing in the garden right now, I'm going to put an apple in, some celery, and just to get some red polyphenols, we're going to add the cranberries in. We also just harvested these herbs from the garden. You can use whatever herbs you like. Today we're going to use rosemary and thyme, a little bit of garlic, and we had bacon this morning for breakfast. And this is the leftover bacon grease. You know, this is something I encourage you to do. If you are buying good pasture-raised pork, you might as well save the delicious bacon grease. This is regenerative. So I'm going to use this leftover bacon grease because it's going to taste delicious and I don't want to waste it. So the first thing I'm going to do is hollow out this pumpkin. So you're going to take it on its side and then cut off the top. Okay. I could have cut off just a little bit more, as you can see. But anyway, I can still definitely see where the edge is. And so what I'm going to do is take a spoon and start to run down the edges, separating the seeds from the edge. So you have the option now to save these seeds and plant them. Or you can compost them and they make great chicken food. I'm going to compost these. Wow, there are so many seeds in there. Isn't that incredible? So you kind of have to get aggressive with it and scrape the sides away because also there's like a stringy interior. And so you want to scrape away all of the seeds and as much of that stringy interior as you can. Okay, these ones I'm going to save to plant because it's like they practically jumped out of the compost bin to be saved. All right, now you're going to save this top though. Now the first thing to do is season the inside of your squash because part of the meal is you're going to scoop the squash and eat it. So I have my salt here. I'm going to sort of tilt it to a diagonal and start seasoning all of the inside of it. All right, there you go. This is when you wish you had some pre-cracked pepper, but I don't. So I'm going to crack a bunch of pepper in here. And then shake it around a bit. Okay, so here we have our seasoned pumpkin ready to be stuffed. So we are going to cook some of the stuffing in a pan on the stove, and I'm going to prep a little bit of that now. I'm going to set this off to the side. So the first thing that I am going to put in this pan is a little bit of the bacon grease. There you go. And then we'll start with an onion. So when cooking onions, I like to cut off the ends because I think it is always nice to have a flat surface. It is dangerous to cook something that is round because it's constantly rolling out of your grasp. And so the first thing to do is always cut a nice slit so that it can be flat on your cutting board. And then I'm just going to cut these into little cubes because they are going to cook down. All right. I'm going to get these into the pan. All right, now I'm going to use 2 heads of garlic, but this is a preference. You can use as much as you like. I'm just going to throw it in because it will cook down quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and prep some of the other things that are going to go into this. First, I'm going to cook this alone. Then I'm going to add the meat to it. And then much later, I'm going to add the apples and the cranberries and the bread and the bone broth. I'm just going to go slowly, but I'm going to prep those things now. So let's start with an apple that we just picked from our tree. I'm going to cut this into small cubes as well. I love apple season. If you guys have any space on your property, you should plant an apple tree. I promise you will not regret it. They are so special, so wonderful to have. And unlike, peach season, which is so fleeting, cherry season, which is so fleeting, it feels like apples last all fall. They can sort of stay on the tree. And so it's like the gift that keeps on giving. All right, now I'm going to cut up some of this sourdough bread. Okay. So here again, I'm just going to cut these into some cubes as well. All right. Next, we're going to cut up the celery. We just pulled this out of the garden moments ago. It smells so fragrant. Perfect. Compost these tops. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in with the onions. All right, now we're going to go ahead and cut up these herbs. We're not going to add them right now, but this rosemary needs to get chopped up. We also just got this from the garden. Nice, this is a young rosemary plant. As they get old, they can get so woody and stiff, and this one still has really soft stems. But you still want to try to remove the stem as much as possible, and then we will chop this up finely. All right. And this thyme is so delicate, I'm just going to try to pull it off of its stem. But I think it might be challenging. No, it's coming off. If you find that it's too hard to peel the leaves off of the stem, that means the stem is delicate enough to cook and eat. But nobody likes to bite into a big woody stem. It's not very toothsome. All right. I'm just going to put this into this little dish for now, and we'll take it over to the stove and add it later. Now we are ready to get this on the stove, so I'm going to take this and the other ingredients over. I'm going to start this out on a high heat just to get it going, but there's a chance I'll move it down to the lower heat. So I'm going to give this a little stir. And then right away, I want to season my onions because adding salt to your onions will automatically soften them. And we want to get these soft as soon as possible. I'm going to stir the salt in to sort of evenly distribute. All right, and now I'm going to move these onto the lower heat. So I don't want them to burn right away. I want them to soften. If you cook onions at a low and slow temperature, it releases sugars in it, and so they taste so much sweeter. And so, you have to decide what you like. Do you like the more like bitter burned onion, or do you like sort of the sweeter onion? And if you want that bitter onion taste, burn them. And if you like that sweeter taste, then put it on a lower temperature and take your time a little bit. These will eventually get a little bit browned because I'm going to cook them with the venison meat. But I want to make sure that I bring out a little bit of the sweetness in them. So we are trying at the Peace Offering to incorporate more ruminant animals and into the diet. And that means animals that have multiple stomachs, or they have an organ called a rumen. And it makes their fat, when you eat them, their fat can always be saturated. You can always sort of trust that that is going to be healthy fat for you. And this is grass-fed venison with a little bit of beef in it as well, grass-fed beef, pasture-raised. And this is a sausage. I chose to do a sausage in the pumpkin because it's sort of higher fat and just a little bit more delicious in with those breadcrumbs especially. So we recommend trying to incorporate venison into your diet, and a sausage is a really tasty way to do it, especially when it's mixed with a little bit of beef. People say that venison can start to taste gamey, but try it out. Try to incorporate it into your diet. All right, you can see that when the onions start to get a little bit translucent, that is what you're going for. All right, now that they have, I'm going to put them back onto the high heat and add the venison. So I'm cutting it up now just because I want as many edges as possible browned. So I'm using sausage, which has already been seasoned with salt and sugar and other spices. But if for some reason you're using ground beef or something that hasn't been seasoned, this would be a great time to add salt to it and pepper if you're doing that. I'm going to continue to cut these into smaller pieces. And then I'm just going to generally keep things moving around. Because now that we are on such a high temperature, things can get browned much easier. All right, I'm also now going to add my cranberries to give them a chance. These are fresh cranberries. You can use dried ones. You can leave them out. But we're always trying to get this dark red skinned fruit into our diet because it's a good prebiotic for Akkermansia. And that is a probiotic that lives in your gut, and you have to feed it in order for it to stay there. And so we're trying to cultivate that in our gut, and you do that by eating the foods that it eats. And so you're constantly trying to add these things into your diet: pomegranate seeds, tart cherries. There are a lot of things that have these properties that feed the Akkermansia. All right, now I'm going to add the apples. I think that they are going to give off quite a bit of moisture. And I'm trying to gauge how much bone broth I'm going to need, because basically what the bone broth is for is to get soaked up in the sourdough bread. And so I'm putting the apples in now to find out what type of moisture, or the amount of moisture rather, that they're going to release. All right, now I'm going to add the sourdough breadcrumbs. Give these a good stir. Now at this point, I'm going to add bone broth. And I want to add just enough that it will get soaked up. Oh, this is a good bone broth. You can tell by how gelatinous it is. Well done, Roly Roti. All right, let's see what that melts down to. I'm pretty sure this bone broth is not seasoned, and so I'm going to add salt and pepper and also my herbs at this time. If you're using dried herbs instead of fresh, you can definitely add them at the beginning. But if you're using fresh herbs, I find that you don't want to cook them too long. You always kind of want to wait and add them as late as possible so they can sort of release their aromas but not really die. Okay. Now at this point, I'm just stirring it until it's incorporated, and then I'm going to bring it back over. And we will stuff our pumpkins. All right, here we go. All right, here we have our stuffing. And we're going to add some eggs to it. And it's probably best to let it cool down a little bit because you don't want scrambled eggs in there. You want the egg to bake as this pumpkin bakes. So we're going to crack 2 eggs. Beautiful eggs. And scramble them a little bit. All right, now I'm going to stir this into my stuffing mixture. All right, and then once you feel like you've got this egg mixed in thoroughly, you can start to stuff it inside of your pumpkin, and then we will get that in the oven. I'm using this wooden spoon so that I don't scrape the bottom of my dish. It's really important not to create a bunch of scrapes inside of your pots and pans, because that's how it becomes toxic. And so you must be really mindful of that. I'm going to kind of press it down in there. This is so exciting. This would be something great to do with your Thanksgiving leftovers. Stuffing and turkey, put it all inside of a pumpkin and bake it. All right, I'm going to go stick this in the oven. So we are going to roast this at 350 degrees for about 90 minutes. Here we go. Oh, it looks amazing. I love this meal because it's a full meal in itself. You don't have to make any side dishes. It is perfect just the way that it is. So now we're just going to cut it open and serve it.